Before you feel freaked out or perhaps feel attacked while looking at all of these graphs on the screen, I just want you guys to stay till the end. I'll make sure you understand every single graph perfectly, and I'll make sure that you don't have any confusions at the end. Given that precursor, in the previous video we talked about aggregate supply in the economy and how in the Keynesian model aggregate supply in the short run is reduced, and how we can connect that with the classical notion of aggregate supply and in a way reach a consensus where we can have the Keynesian model in a short run and the classical model of aggregate supply in the long run. In this video, I'll go through how we can derive aggregate demand in the economy. Since this is a little bit dense topic and the derivation is a little bit complex, it is important that you guys watch it slowly and pause where you need so that you understand clearly. And one other thing that I have to keep in mind, or I have to mention to you, is that in economics, we try to keep certain things constant to help us come to the conclusion a lot easier perhaps. Think about economics as a spider web. If there's a flickering or movement at any part of the web, it's going to cause vibration throughout the entire web. And for that reason, it is impossible for us to, if we think about it from an economics perspective, to understand the economics or the complexity of the economics or macroeconomics to be specific, if we allow all the variables to play its role. However, we keep a lot of variables constant when we are studying economics so that we can understand and reach a conclusion perhaps a little bit more conclusively. I'll be going through a lot of assumptions that we make throughout this discussion, or the assumptions that we make throughout the derivation of aggregate demand, so that perhaps we can understand it a lot more conclusively. So given that precursor, let's get on to the topic. If we look at the aggregate demand curve over here, you will notice that it is a downward sloping demand curve, which essentially, if I were to redraw it, which essentially means as the prices go down, the output in the economy increases, and as the prices go up, or on the other way around, as the prices go up in the economy, the output decreases. As the prices go down, the output increases. As the prices go up, the output decreases. We need to understand why do we have that causation, what is the reason behind it, and how we can derive such a graph. To put it in simple words, price has an inverse relationship with GDP, or price has an inverse relationship with income or total output in the economy. To understand this concept better, we need to take a look at the ISLM curve and try to understand it from a perspective of the ISLM curve. In economics, there are lots of different ways of determining or representing equilibrium output in the economy. One way is by essentially, drawing a graph where we can have aggregate supply meet aggregate demand, and that is one way of showing equilibrium, which is in this situation which in this situation is represented by point A. Another way of showing equilibrium is on an ISLM curve, which I hope that you have watched the previous videos or the previous series to understand how we derive and how the ISLM curve is used. Without understanding ISLM curve, it's going to be very difficult for you to understand this topic. So make sure you watch the previous videos so you have a very clear understanding of how the ISLM curve work and what it essentially talk about. In an ISLM curve, the LM, to put it in simple words, the LM represents, let me just move that again. Just give me a second. The LM curve represents money market. The LM curve represents the money market, and to be specific, the LM curve represents the money market in real terms. Just right over there, in real terms. The LM curve talks about the money market, and to be very specific, in real terms. What that means is we assume when we are deriving the LM curve that the prices in the economy are constant, and that any increase in the money supply or decrease in money supply would have a direct and an equal impact on the real money. In other words, we do not make any distinction between nominal money and real money. However, if we were to write an equation, real money or real income is equal to our nominal income. Let's write that mn, or you can write it at m0. divided by prices in the economy. You have to keep this equation in mind, as we'll get back to that in a second. The IS curve represents the product market, the product market, and the IS curve is derived as a schedule from investment, savings, government spending, and taxation. However, we assume that the government spending and taxation is constant, so that we can distinguish or derive the IS curve a lot more conclusively. In the previous video, I went through that the changes in government spending and taxation would move the IS curve or shift the IS curve towards right or left. So to reduce complications, we assume in the derivation of the IS curve that the government spending and taxation are exogenous, which means they are constant. You will notice that the IS curve is derived from the investments saving schedule, which is directly related to interest rate and not directly related to price. And as a result, we make an assumption that when prices increase or decrease, it has no impact. So it has no impact on the IS curve. Although we have to keep in mind, when the prices increase or decrease, in the long run, it is definitely going to impact interest rate. It is definitely going to impact our investment, and definitely going to impact savings, especially when our real income goes down or increases for that matter. However, for the sake of the argument, we make sure that the IS curve does not shift and the IS curve remains constant, and that is because change in prices, at least in the short run, at least in the very short run, does not impact the IS curve as much as we would generally assume. So let's talk about the LM curve. You can see from the equation that the LM curve in real terms is when the nominal money supply is divided by prices. So let's just assume that the nominal money supply in the economy is 10 units or $10, and it's a very simplistic economy, this one. And let's say that the general prices in the economy, or the aggregate prices in the economy, is $2. That would mean that the real prices in the economy is $5. I want to take a brief moment and just quickly go through what real and nominal money means. Real money is the money when we adjust it for inflation. In other words, the LM curve that we derive is not adjusted for inflation. When we adjust our money supply or the nominal money supply for inflation, we get our actual or real money supply. And the reason it's important to do that is because inflation does not change the buying power. Buying power is changed when the real income increases or decreases. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that for whatever reason the prices in the economy are increasing. So if the price in the economy, let's say, jump from $2 to $4, assuming that the money supply or the nominal money supply in the economy is constant, you will notice that you would have a much lower real money supply in the economy. 10 divided by 4 should give us 0.8. You can probably see that, sorry, my bad, not 0.8, should give us 2.5. Okay, $2.5. So the income or the real money or the real prices have decreased because there's an increase in general price level, or in other words, when we have an inflation, when there's an inflation of 100% in this case situation, our real prices would also decrease by almost 50%. So just keep that in mind as I'm going through this explanation. So therefore, as the prices in the economy increases, our real money would decrease. So if I try to represent that on a graph, if the real money decreases, this will cause the LM curve to shift towards the left. Let me try to draw a much clearer diagram. Just give me a second. And this is something that we understand from our previous videos where I talked about how the LM curve can shift towards the right or the left. So make sure you have watched that video, otherwise it's going to be very difficult to understand what is going on. To keep it very simple and straightforward, the LM curve is derived from the nominal money supply divided by the general prices in the economy, and that LM curve is represented in real terms. When we draw, or when we sketch, or when we deduce the LM curve, we generally assume that the prices or the money supply is real. In other words, there is no difference between real and nominal money supply. However, when it comes to Keynesian models, that is not the case. We have to talk about inflation, we have to talk about general prices in the economy. So therefore, we cannot make this assumption. So therefore, if prices in the economy increases, our real money would decrease. And whenever we have a decrease in real value of money, this is going to cause the LM curve, to shift towards the left. So if I can draw a new LM schedule, something like that, and something like that, we would have new points of equilibrium. Let's say that this point is point B. Let's say that that point represents point C. And if I can draw a straight line downwards, you will notice as the prices go up, our income in the economy decreases, or the output level in the economy decreases, and interest rate increases. And that would make intuitive sense from a lot of different perspectives. Let's look at it from an interest perspective. If the interest rate increases, people would not want to invest a lot of money because they would not see the same return in investment if the interest rate would have been lower. So it would make logical sense for them to reduce investment, which would reduce their output. Another way of looking at it is when the real income decreases, individuals' income or real income is less. To put it in simple words, the salary that we get would be reduced because of decrease in money supply or decrease in real money, and therefore we would not be able to consume as much, we would not be able to buy as many products, and therefore the output would decrease. And this is something that we also understand from deriving the ISLM curve. So I can draw a straight line through this. Let's see if I can do that. If I can draw a straight line through this and try to draw that separately, see if I can remove this. If I can remove that, it should be straightforward. And if I try to draw that separately, we will get our aggregate demand curve in the economy. If I were to say that these 3 points, let's say that this is our prices, let's say this is our output, let's say the point A is somewhere, let's extrapolate point A to somewhere over here, let's extrapolate point B to somewhere over here, and let's extrapolate point C to somewhere over there. As you will notice, if we can draw a line through these 3 points, we will notice as the income increases, our prices decreases, and as the prices increases, our income decreases, which is exactly in accordance to our aggregate demand curve. To summarize it again for you guys, the aggregate demand curve is derived from the LM curve, and to be specific, by the leftward shift of the LM curve. And that is because when we have an increase in prices, or decrease in price for that matter, the real wage or the real income is impacted, and that is going to cause the LM curve to shift towards the right or towards the left, depending upon whether prices are increasing or decreasing. And therefore that will have a direct or an inverse and therefore it would have an inverse impact with the income in the economy. And we use that idea to extrapolate our aggregate demand curve. And hopefully by now you will have a very clear understanding of how we can draw the Keynesian aggregate supply and demand curve. In the very short term, we assume that because of sticky wages and because of contractual or legal or inventory reasons, the aggregate supply is constant and horizontal because there are no changes in prices. And in the long run, as wages become less and less stickier, and as our inventories get depleted, individuals become more and more optimistic, the long run aggregate supply would go back to the constant or the classical level, which is the full employment level. Let's draw that over here. This is our full employment. Let's call it YF. And the aggregate demand curve is a downward sloping demand curve which is a relationship between output and prices in the economy, which we have gone through right now. And when we combine them both, we reach an equilibrium output or the equilibrium level in the economy, and that, according to Keynesian, is how the economy functions, at least in the short run.